Well, here we are. Good morning. We may be a couple of minutes early, John, but we are back in studio. I'm Brian Main. John Begnasco. John's got his phone going again with the feedback. Tiger is off with his son Isaac, coaching soccer this morning. It's been a couple of weeks. We're a bit rusty. You can just turn that down, John. Heck of a way to get started this morning. But yes, it's yours truly, Brian Main, John Begnasco.
Sorry about that.
John sitting in Tiger's seat. Again, Tiger off coaching his son in soccer this morning. So good to have you back with us. Good to be back in studio. Couple of weeks off. Going to shake the cobwebs off. John, good to see you. We saw Tiger this morning.
Never been in the Tiger seat before.
Is it warm?
No, but, there's a lot of pressure here.
A lot of pressure, right.
Yeah.
Also, too, I'm in control of the video now and the cameras this morning along with the computer and recording for the network.
Speaking of added pressure.
So, yeah, doing a lot of multitasking this morning.
You're good at that, though. You're a Renaissance man.
I try to be.
You do all kinds of things.
Try to be.
Yeah.
So today, video, camera operator, computer operator, getting the show ready for the network. Hello, those of you on Biz Talk Radio. I want to welcome you into the show. This is a pre-recorded show from last week. Have to get that out of the way. We have a good show lined up today. It's John and myself. Tiger is off again. John, we've got a good guest today, somebody we've had on previously on Garden America.
Gregg Lowery. If you want to know anything about roses, without exaggerating, Gregg is one of the most knowledgeable rose people in the entire world. So, I was just thinking, I was going to say, so anything you want to know about roses, ask Gregg, except, I'm trying to think. It's like when you meet someone who is a PhD expert in their field.
But they're normal?
No, but it's like going up to Einstein and just saying, my VCR keeps flashing 12. Do you know how to fix it? It's like, and you don't ask those kind of people those kind of questions.
That's too rudimentary.
Right.
Way too rudimentary.
So you don't say to Gregg, should I be fertilizing my roses now?
Way under his scope of wanting to get involved with, right?
Well, actually, he's such a nice person that he
would help you.
He would. He absolutely would.
So
anyway, it'll be fun.
Roses today, then, right?
Well,
obviously?
You know what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about our trip in Europe when we went to Rosa Belgica.
Yes.
And we've had listeners ask us about what happened then, and they would like to know. So I thought it would be Gregg spoke at Rosa Belgica, which was put on by the World Federation of Rose Societies, and then I took a trip with Gregg and Steve to Germany. We went to Sangerhausen.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that.
Kind of relive the trip.
Yeah. It'll be fun. It was one of the highlights of my summer.
It was a good trip, wasn't it?
Next to doing the show with you and Tiger, that was the highlight of my summer.
Wow.
And you know what show I'm talking about.
I do know. And we've also got Costa Rica to talk about at some point, just a reminder for people.
Well, you know what? Costa Rica, I think there's only 2 weeks left.
To get that discount?
To get the discount if you're going to sign up. And I know a lot of listeners have been thinking, hey, it's something I'd like to do. Well,
do it.
Don't wait.
Yeah, let's have some fun.
Right.
Costa Rica, April 20th through the 29th, 2024. 6 months away, by the way.
Wow.
Only 6 months away.
Time flies.
And you just can't sit still. You're going to be taken off to Hawaii in January, which is unrelated to Garden America. This is a personal trip, you and Shannon.
And Jesse, my son Jesse's coming with us. I think we're going to rent an Airbnb.
You kind of like those, don't you now?
Yeah, well, Jesse's really good at picking them out. But we're going to Kona. And the only reason we're going is I was looking online and Southwest had tickets for $62 to Hawaii. So from San Diego to Hawaii for $62, it's like Shannon said, why would we even stay?
So what, $124 or so round trip?
Yeah.
Per person?
Right.
Wow. Well, have fun. Back in time to get ready for Costa Rica.
We will. We're going to Kona, and I'm thinking I would like to go. I want to leave some things on my bucket list because when you've got an empty bucket, what do you do, right?
Yeah, right. That means that
right.
No more.
In this summer, going to the Rose Garden in Sangerhausen was one of the main items on my bucket list. But another thing I've always wanted to do was to visit Molokai and take the donkeys down the seaside cliffs.
Now, is that as dangerous as the donkeys down the Grand Canyon?
I don't know. I would imagine it's probably the same. The seaside cliffs in Molokai are the highest seaside cliffs anywhere in the world.
As Johnny Carson used to say, I did not know that.
So anyway, I think that might
good for
be
you.
fun.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, Shannon's already opted out. She said,
On the donkeys?
Yeah, you and Jesse want to go. I'm going to lay by the pool.
Yeah, exactly. A little something for everybody. So welcome back, those that are tuned in on Biz Talk Radio, those tuned in on Facebook Live. I say welcome back because we had the last 2 weeks off. It's good to get back in the studio, get back in the old chair or chairs, as the case may be. Tiger will be back with us next week. So the three amigos, your garden buddies, all together back next week. But in the meantime, it's John and myself. Our guest we talked about, Gregg's going to be with us talking about roses. And speaking of that, the quote of the week, the newsletter. Let's do the quote since it does.
By the way, I want to quickly send best wishes to our friend from Tucson, Kim.
Yes, Kim,
who is recovering from a stroke. Hope it wasn't too serious.
And thank you for tuning in, Kim. My goodness, I hope that we can be some therapy for you as well.
Yeah,
get you back
we'll
on,
try.
We'll
try.
Help to mend you, get you back on your feet.
Since we're talking about roses today, I found this quote in a book I had from the 1800s. And it was a little thin book about, I think it was called something like How I Grow My Roses by Helen Millman. And she said, "In the garden of peace we stand waiting. There can be summer in our hearts without flowers, but there can be no summer in a garden without roses."
Well, that's true. That gets right to the point.
I thought that was great.
Speaking of that, now we've had a lot of heat here in Southern California. I guess a lot of areas of California as well. How are your roses doing? Any blooms? I've got a couple that are trying to bloom, but it just, this time of the year, it just doesn't seem right.
Well, I have had a lot of buds, but I'm trying to get the roses to recuperate from my trip to Montana. When we went to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons, they were left at home for the first time that I recall with no one to look at.
But wasn't there supposed to be an automatic watering system in place?
Right, and it was. And when I came home, virtually everything was alive.
Okay.
But everything needs to recuperate. There's a difference between alive and thrive.
Right.
And you can be alive and in a hospital bed somewhere.
Is the patient alive? Yes. How's the patient doing? Could be better.
Right. So anyway, I'm trying to, and I don't know if you remember the area where I had my roses that were under quarantine. There was a table set up in the back.
Is it, as you walk out your back, is it to your left, my left, or your left?
If you walk out the back patio,
Right.
It's to the right.
Oh, okay. Different direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
All
I've been clearing out that whole area, leveling the soil, got rid of the table, and I'm relining up all the roses. And now I'm going through pot by pot, pulling out the weeds, giving them one last fertilizing, and hoping everything's going to be in good condition and survive this heat, because with the heat, it's not only the automatic watering, but supplemental watering to get each pot that's missed. And they're all doing well, but, it's 1,500 roses I've got to go through one by one. So
I'm never going to complain again about my 40 or 50 that I have to care for.
And the one rose I have that yesterday had maybe 5, it's in a 2-gallon pot, had 5 blooms on it, was Green Planet, which I got back from you.
And doing well?
Doing really well. The heat doesn't seem to bother
No,
that
you know
at
what?
all.
That's a very hardy rose. I mean, I've had mine since 2004 or 5, from when the auction used to be in Carlsbad at that little, what was that? It was like where the town council used to meet in that little building in Carlsbad.
No, it was, what was that place called? Anyway, it was right by the McGee Rose Garden.
Right.
Yeah.
And I won that in an auction. Or actually, Eric did, my son.
Yes,
Green
I
Planet.
recall.
15 some odd years ago. More than that.
I think you might have been were you the auctioneer?
Yeah. You and I were up there.
Yeah, and they gave you money for being the auctioneer, and I think
Right.
you gave it to Eric and told him he could bid on a rose.
Yeah, I said, just, what, and he kept going. You know what? There were a lot of bids on that rose. Speaking of bidding, which we did just for a second, we bid you a farewell. Well,
What?
not a long farewell, but we have to take a break for our friends on Biz Talk Radio. So we'll be back after these messages. We're going to bring on Gregg talking about roses today. Welcome back to the show, Brian Main, John Begnasco. Tiger's off today. He's back next week. We're going to come back after these messages with our good friends and for our good friends on Biz Talk Radio. Stay with us. We are back from the break. Welcome back to Garden America, those on Biz Talk Radio, those of you on Facebook Live. It is so good to see all the familiar names, and we really appreciate you being back with us after a 2-week hiatus. So we get everything out of the way in terms of the opening monologue. We talked about our guest coming up. Hey, our guest is coming up right now, John. How about that? Gregg is waiting online, John.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be able to talk to our good buddy Gregg Lowery, formerly from Vintage Gardens. And we're going to talk a little bit about what happened to Vintage Gardens and what Gregg's doing now, and then reminisce about our Rosarian tour this summer.
And we can live vicariously through the both of you.
There you go. Hey, Gregg, welcome to the show.
Hey, Gregg, are you there?
Hey, yeah.
There
Sorry,
you go.
Brian, something's going on here. Go ahead.
Don't walk around when you talk. Yeah, it's so good to be able to chat with you today. I thought for our listeners who are not that familiar with roses or with Vintage Gardens that you might just briefly tell us about what Vintage Gardens was and what it's become.
Yeah, well, Vintage Gardens started as three guys wanting to put together a nursery around their passion for roses. That was back in the early 1980s in Sonoma County, and my partners, Philip Robinson and George Matson, both had lived here for some time, and I moved up from San Francisco with a collection of roses, and we pooled everything together and began to build a nursery of roses. And that went on until 2014, about 30 years. In 2014, we closed the nursery. I would like to have retired, but when you have 4,000 roses, it's hard to retire.
Now, if it was a cactus collection, it would have been easier.
Yeah.
You mentioned a collection, but the size of the collection to me was staggering. I think it may have been the largest collection of roses in the United States, or at least not that far off.
Well, collections are funny things, especially when you collect live things, as you know now.
Right.
And live collections tend to come and go. We know that we brought into the garden here in Sebastopol more than 5,000 varieties of roses.
Wow.
Currently, we're not sure how many still are here. It's probably around 3,000. So that's pretty big, and I don't know another collection in the United States that has been such an insane attempt to pull together all of the different classes of roses from history. And that was our objective, was to be able to tell the story of roses live.
Well, a lot of people might endeavor to the same thing that you did, the same type of project you did, but reason usually prevails. So obviously, the collection became too much for one person to maintain. And after you closed down the nursery, you still felt a responsibility, I assume, to roses, and you certainly didn't lose your passion. So I thought you came up with a really unique idea of preserving these roses, and I thought maybe you could share what the Friends of Vintage Gardens is doing right now.
Sure, but I'll correct you on that. It's the Friends of Vintage Roses. It's a necessary change of title in order to be an independent nonprofit, which is what we are.
I stand corrected.
And back to your question was about how
you're maintaining the collection through the Friends of Vintage Roses.
Right. Well, the collection has resided on the property I live on in Sebastopol since 1986, and so when our nursery closed down, the collection was still here and continues to grow here in part. But our objective now, this comes from a lifetime of having friends who are also crazy rose collectors and lovers. You get to know a lot of people around the world who also have the same infirmity that you have when it comes to a softness for flowers. And those people are great people to turn to when you want help. And so what we have tried, what we are working on now with the nonprofit is to meet our mission of preserving this collection into the future by co-opting the help of many friends around the world who will take on a portion of this collection and agree to preserve it, but also agree to prepare for passing that part of the collection on to someone younger and someone who has the same passion. So it's about building a network of friends and people who understand why plants are so important in our lives.
Now, dividing the collection up, I guess that they're mostly divided by classes, maybe hybrid teas, floribundas, hybrid perpetuals, polyanthus. I think that each person in charge could be referred to as a curator, and currently, how many of those people do you have maintaining your collection?
Right now, we have 14 people spread around the United States. We have a curator in Iowa, a curator in South Carolina, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
And we're probably going to add another dozen in the next couple of years. It's difficult, however, because the more connections that I have to keep up with, the harder it is for me. Anyway, that's...
Well, that's a perfect segue into the next part of our talk, which is going to be about the World Federation of Roses and Rosa Belgica. As soon as we come back from this commercial break, we'll look forward to talking more with Gregg Lowery about roses.
Yes, indeed. And those on Facebook Live, any questions for Gregg Lowery or one of us, feel free to post it right there in the comments section on our Facebook page. Gregg Lowery, our guest this morning here on Garden America. So for those of you on Biz Talk Radio, this next break is for you. So do stay with us. Biz Talk Radio, Facebook Live, back after these messages. This is Garden America for your weekend. And just like that, we are back from the break a bit quicker on Facebook Live. Want to thank those tuned in on Biz Talk Radio. Also want to thank the staff, Stephanie and her team at Biz Talk Radio, keeping us on the air nationally each and every weekend. So a big thank you to you. As we have returned, Tiger is off today. It's yours truly, Brian Main. John Begnasco, Gregg Lowery is our guest. And John, we continue with our conversation that you had set up in terms of what we're going to be talking about now after the break. And here we are, John, after the break.
Right. And I see some really good friends of ours are on Facebook. I was going to ask Greg if he was following, but I see he's replied to our good friend Jan from Brentwood already. And one of the reasons we're having this conversation is because of our listeners saying they wanted to know what happened in Europe. And Greg, this, let's see, it was...
was it July?
No, it was June.
Okay, June.
Excuse me, first part of June. We went to Rosa Belgica, which was put on by the World Federation of Rose Societies, and I was really surprised. I was surprised by many things in Europe, but one of the things I was surprised about was how many people all over the world are concerned with the same thing that Greg and I are concerned about, preserving rose varieties. And I guess that my experience was limited to what was happening in the United States. And to see people all over the world concerned about the same thing was in a sense heartening, and it was perfect for me because people in Belgium, excuse me, sorry about that, I'm getting all choked up. But the people in Belgium spoke French, and Greg also spoke French.
You need some water?
I do. I'll go get some during the break.
Yeah, okay.
And when we went to Germany, Steve spoke German, and so we had both French and German covered.
All bases covered.
All bases covered. But Greg, I was wondering if you could maybe, while I tried to get the frog out of my throat, if you could maybe tell our listeners a little bit about what occurred during Rosa Belgica and maybe what the World Federation of Rose Societies is currently.
Boy, I don't know much about the inner workings of the World Federation of Rose Societies, except that it has one member of Rose Society from each country in the world that wants to participate.
And Rosa Belgica, I believe, had representatives from 16 different countries.
Yeah, I thought it was 23, but it was a lot.
It could have been. Yeah. It could have been 23.
Yeah. So it's an opportunity for people from these rose societies to exchange information, to network with people around the world, and hopefully to be able to put forth their concerns about what's important in the world of roses, what they can do, as a group, to make for a better world of roses. And it's an amazing group of people, which includes a lot of scientists from around the world who are studying genetics, who are looking into the various things that the genus Rosa has to offer in terms of the future of the world, in terms of learning about plant, the genetic possibilities of plants. It's an amazing thing, and there are a lot of preservationists who were participating in that meeting at Rosa Belgica. And we had our 2 cents and took an opportunity to say, we don't think you need to start at the top with a large conglomeration of the people who can most afford to travel. But if you start at home with the people who are actually doing the work of growing and preserving their own collections of roses, and more important than that, are sharing them with other people, because that's the key to preservation. Unlocking the passion to not simply grow and admire the things that you love, the artistic creations of mankind in the world of roses, but the old, passing grandma's rose on to her grandchildren. And that's what happened to me. My grandmother passed her passion for gardening on to me. And for that, I'm forever grateful, and I want to emulate what she did. And that's what we're trying to do, is to engender an understanding of the importance of that, of sharing.
While we were there, there were so many different. It would take hours to even touch base on everything that we learned there. But when it came to preserving roses, someone came up with the 3-3-3 rule, which I think you and I have maybe amended to 3-3-30. But maybe you could explain what the principles of that rule are in preserving varieties of roses.
Sure. The idea was a number of years ago, and it's essentially, when do we say we don't have to worry about preserving? When it's not preserved enough. And so his preserved enough was in the hand. If that variety of a rose we know is in the hands of 3 nurseries available for sale in the world, in 3 gardens, preferably public gardens that are open to anyone, and then in the hands of either 3 or 30 individuals, and I think it's 3.
Right.
So that go out there, we have to work that.
Hey, Greg, we're having phone problems. You're cutting out. You're on a cell phone, right?
I am, yeah.
Okay, that's a little better right there. Maybe if you just stay still, I don't know, who knows, but we don't want to miss anything you're saying.
Right, stop breathing.
Right. Yeah, I do have something going on here. Maybe it's a little feedback, but yeah.
That's better.
I will speak. So, to John.
Yes. So that's one of the ways of preserving roses, and I think that the way it was presented, the 3-3-3 rule, was the 3 private gardens that it was in. Those people were supposed to remain in contact with each other, so that if one of them lost it, they replaced it. So, which would, I guess, make sense, but definitely there's thousands of roses, hundreds for sure, but probably thousands that fall into that category of not being preserved in that manner, not being commercially raised anymore, and hopefully they're still in a few public gardens, but maybe not 3 public gardens. I know the Heritage, you just collected varieties at the San Jose Heritage Rose Garden, and they have a lot of one-of-a-kind varieties, and I'm sure they've lost some over the years. The rose gardens at Zangerhausen in Germany, and Buda-Tuteni in Hungary, and Roserie Val-Dumas in France all have probably one-of-a-kind roses that need preserving. This question just came to mind, and it was something I honestly don't know much about and was surprised to learn. And I'll understand if you don't know much about it, because you may not have been paying attention like I was during the conference. But I think it was Sweden was putting up a gene bank for roses. Do you recall that?
Yeah, actually, some years ago, when that was going on, when that process, the Swedes, a group of people in Sweden who are rose lovers, wanted to preserve the history of roses that had grown in Swedish gardens, and so they put together a study in which they went everywhere all over the country and logged in exactly what was growing where. And now they're creating a genetic bank of all of those varieties to be able to re-engender them if some natural catastrophe takes them away.
Well, it's amazing just to know things like that are going on. It's time for another break, Greg, but we'll be back quickly on the radio and even quicker on Facebook.
Absolutely. John's got it down, no doubt about it. Tigers off this week. I'm Brian Main, John Begnasco. Gregg Lowery talking about roses, talking about the trip this past summer with John and Greg. Questions on Facebook Live. Put them right there in the comments section. Those on Biz Talk Radio. Going to take a break. Stay with us. This is Garden America. Okay, we are back from the break. Good to have you along. Thank you for tuning in after us being off for last couple of weeks or so. Brian Main, John Begnasco, Gregg Lowery, and we're going to continue our conversation. John, this is, by the way, for those on Biz Talk Radio, this is the final segment of hour number one. News coming up top of the hour, 6 minutes after we return. So hopefully your market carries at least one or both hours here on Garden America.
I want to move into Germany from Belgium, but before we do that, I wanted to mention that the conference in Belgium gave me the opportunity to meet people that I had only heard about or maybe communicated with, maybe through email, but not met in person. And I have to tell you that meeting some of these people in person was almost like meeting a celebrity. Or some type of
because you've
dignitary.
read about them, you've corresponded emails over the years.
Right. And so I thought that before we leave Belgium and move into Germany, that Greg, maybe you could cover. Now I know a lot of these people are friends of yours that you've known for a long time, but maybe cover 3 or 4 of the people who were at Rosa Belgica that really stand out in the rose world. And I'll just start off by throwing it open to Viru and Girija from India, who, I had an immediate affinity to. They're the kind of people you just want to hug as soon as you meet them.
Yeah, that's exactly the pair that I first would come up with. Viru and Virija Viraragavan, who are breeders of roses, and they have focused on a rose that is native to the subcontinent and is also the world's largest rose. Not only does it have very large flowers, but it actually lives by climbing to the tops of forests and blooming at the tops of forests in the Himalayas. And that's Rosa gigantea. They have bred that rose for their lifetimes, and brought in other tropical edge roses that grow within the subtropics, in order to provide roses for gardens in places in the hottest parts of the world that can't actually grow roses very well. So they've done this magnificent gift to the world.
And they also just wanted to briefly add, have just written a book that I would encourage our listeners to get a copy of. It's called Roses in the Fire of Spring. And it's available on Amazon. And I haven't read it cover to cover yet, but it's on my list, and right now I've just looked at the pictures. Brian always looks at the pictures first in the book, so I did the same thing.
Roses in the Fire of Spring.
Yeah, isn't that a great title?
Yeah.
I think it's from a poem by Omar Khayyam, if I'm not mistaken. Greg, after, let's see, we mentioned Viru and Girija. There's a couple people that you know. I had no familiarity with the people from Japan, but there's a ton of work being done in Japanese rose breeding, and also a an interest in collecting some of the older Asian varieties of roses that maybe never made it to the West. I wonder if you could let us know about some of the people you know in that area.
Yeah, Japan and now China have become countries that are obsessed with roses, with particularly with this kind of huge history of roses that we have been in America. In my lifetime, it's become kind of an obsession. The sort of historic look back at roses that once grew in American gardens that came from Europe. The Japanese got that bug a number of years ago and have created some of the most amazing gardens, rose gardens in the world. And in fact, in 2025, they're having another World Federation conference near in Western Japan that will focus on historical roses and show and bring people to some of these amazing gardens. We saw also in China the same thing. There's this new passion for the roses of the world and for making collections of them. Japan is a challenging place to travel to because learning the language you can't do it in a quick 3-month conversational mode. To communicate with people, we rely on the world to speak English, and we're really fortunate that we don't have to learn other languages in order to communicate with folks. And by the way, the trip to Germany, John, has got me learning German now because I have too many questions that I have to ask in German.
And probably too many books to read in German.
Right, and lots of books.
Carla, one of our listeners, you've probably, if you're looking at Facebook, saw her question, but for our listeners on the radio, Carla says she doesn't want to interrupt our discussion, but she has a question that you might be able to answer. One of her roses just died, and she thinks it's Timothy Eaton, but she lost the tag. She's pretty sure she got it from Vintage Gardens and wants to know if the rose is still available anywhere, or are there any other roses with the name Timothy or something like that?
Yeah, Timothy Eaton, she did get it from us. I think we were the only grower of that rose for a number of years. And Carla, you've joined good company because we also have lost Timothy Eaton.
Oh.
It's a beautiful rose, and as I recall, it has some of the sort of coffee tones that are very popular nowadays. This is why we at the Friends of Vintage Roses are trying to preserve these things, because when you grow something, a rose like that, it becomes a part of you. And
Right.
to be told that it's gone, it's like losing a family member for some of us.
Well, hopefully we won't lose any more family members with enough help. Greg, we got to take another quick break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking to Gregg Lowery about roses and our trip to Germany here on Garden America.
Stay with us, those on Biz Talk Radio. News coming up in just a very few moments. And again, we are back at 6 minutes after, hoping that your markets carry at least one or both hours here on Garden America. Back with Gregg Lowery after the break, the news break on Biz Talk Radio, and coming back even quicker here on Facebook Live. John Bagnasco, Brian Main for your weekend, and this is Garden America. Okay, we are back from the break. We trust you had a good break, those on Biz Talk Radio. Those of you on Facebook Live. Thank you for tuning in. Good to see so many familiar names. As yes, we're talking about roses today with Gregg Lowery, Brian Main, John Bagnasco. Greg is still with us, John. So let us continue now as we venture through the wild world of roses, and of course, hearkening back to your trip this past summer to Europe.
Yeah, I see our good friend from Pakistan, Hastam, has joined us. And Greg, I don't know if you've collected the roses of Pakistan yet.
We'll get there.
Yeah, definitely.
At least it's closer to India, so he can work with Vero and Grija to get some of theirs. Hey, I just marked down Find Timothy Eaton.
Yeah, right.
But
Yeah.
Greg, when we left Rosa Belgica, I guess I don't want to shortchange Belgium, so I should maybe ask you before we move to the city of Dortmund in Germany. I should probably ask you what your highlight in Belgium was. If there was one of the gardens, or maybe one of the lectures, or maybe seeing a person you hadn't seen for a few years. Do you remember, or do you have a specific highlight from Belgium?
Apart from the beer, I think it was the Tantan shop. That was my favorite part.
Now you're going to have to explain to our listeners who that is.
Oh, he's a cartoon character that the boy wonder who traveled the world, and anyway, a very good thing to grow up with, the Tantan books.
Well, if you're going to pick that as one of your highlights, I guess I got to pick the Leonidas chocolate shop.
Yeah.
We were able to help them open up one morning, and
well, you helped them open.
We helped them open. We were in a hurry. Put out chairs and tables for them, and each got a free chocolate because of that. And then certainly we bought some. Okay, Greg, we're going to move to Dortmund on our way to what was definitely one of the holy grails of my life, visiting the gardens at Zangerhausen. But we took a tour through Germany, starting from West Germany, and the first major garden we went to was in Dortmund. And I was surprised at the beauty of that garden, not just the number of roses, but the planting, the landscape planting in general. What were your impressions of Dortmund?
I thought it was fabulous. We always think in America that we have the best of everything. We grow the best. We have the best botanical gardens. We must, certainly. When you go to other places in the world, you discover how much passion people have for the beautiful things in life that are shared by everybody. And that's the impression you get when you walk into the garden at Dortmund, that this is like home to many of the German people. It's a place that they love to travel to and spend days in. And it's an amazing collection of historic roses and modern roses. So many that, I think we both got backaches from leaning down and trying to read tags and take photographs of things that we had never seen before. It's a beautiful place. And the garden is so beautifully laid out. And John and I walked into one section of the garden which was really basically just a beautiful garden. It was a mixture of all kinds of annuals and perennials and flowering shrubs and roses and trees and roses climbing up into trees and on and on and on. Just a kind of magical place.
And I know that you and Steve were a little leery because you heard that there was going to be a plant sale the day that we were there. And,
yeah, we were told to watch out.
Yeah, and you thought that the crowds might interfere with looking at the roses, But as it turned out, the crowds were around the plant sale, and the rest of the garden was very easy to walk through. But I enjoyed the plant sale. I think maybe it's my retail background, but the quality of the plants, it was not just roses. They also had dahlias and allium bulbs and all types of garden ornaments and baskets and things for sale. But the quality of the plants was, I would say they were probably some of the nicest plants I'd ever seen. And I was able to see some of the roses that I had bought a few years earlier and still have not been able to get to this country, but was able to see some of them. And one of them, Brian, I think I might have told you, was Scent of Woman.
Yes.
And Brian had probably about 6 or 7 years ago come up with the idea of calling a rose Scent of a Woman. And someone else must have heard you, Brian, because
they beat me to it.
They beat you to it in Europe. But I just thought that plant sale was fascinating. Of course, I felt bad that I couldn't buy anything to take home. I did get two baskets for my wife Shannon, which she really liked, and got those to come home. Now I'm rambling here because all these thoughts are coming into my head. But one of the things that we should talk about, Greg, is that frequently when you visit a rose garden, the tag on a rose will be lost or a rose will be mislabeled. And I used to think that if you went to Europe, everything would be correct. And one of the things we noticed, I think it was maybe first in Belgium, but even as we went into Germany, that some of the roses were mislabeled. And I think you pointed that out on a couple of old garden roses specifically.
Mislabels are, anyone who's ever worked in the nursery, or for that matter, in many businesses that have a lot of inventory, things get mislabeled. It's a normal part of the process. What's expected of the business owner or the curator in a botanical garden is that those errors get corrected. And there was plenty of evidence in all of the gardens in Germany that they are on top of it. They are working to make sure that the accidental mislabelings that happen, that are going to happen, get corrected. But the moment one walks into a garden and encounters the incorrect label, it's a bit frustrating. And some people tend to be very critical. And so we had read many comments and heard many comments about people who had traveled to Dortmund and to Sangerhausen who complained that the labeling was terrible, which is not true. It's a first impression, and it's an unfortunate comment made without thought about a place where the people work so hard to do something at the absolute peak of excellence.
I think there was one rose, and I'm trying to think of what it was, but one that we had misidentified over here, and we were able to confirm its identity in Dortmund. So it kind of went both ways. I was just reading on here. You may not have an answer to this. I don't think I've ever bought anything from Alibaba.
We're going to take a break. You want to wait till after the break?
Yeah, when we come back,
okay.
Greg, you might look at Hastam's question on Facebook and see if we have some type of answer for him.
Okay. So we are going to take a break for our good friends on Biz Talk Radio. Thank you for tuning in as you do each and every week. And the rest of us on Facebook Live, just like we mentioned, questions, comments right there, much like Hastam has done. Then right there, Facebook page, comments. Again, could be a question, could be a comment. and we'll get to it just as quickly as we can as we return with our guest, Gregg Lowery, here. It is Garden America. Brian Main, John Bagnasco. Thank you for tuning in. Back after these messages. We have returned from the break, very quick on Facebook Live, a bit longer, though, on Biz Talk Radio. So thank you if you are tuned in on Biz Talk Radio. Thank you for supporting our many sponsors who make it possible for us to stay on the air here on the Facebook Live and Biz Talk Radio. John?
Yeah, this was kind of an interesting question from Hastam in Pakistan, Greg. And he says that they wants to know if they can grow roses from seed. And he says that often when he buys rose seed from Alibaba, it doesn't germinate. Of course, you can grow roses from seed because that's where roses come from. But they won't come true to variety. So
are these like these seeds that you and I bought 6 months ago?
You and I, or you?
Well, you told me about the site. What was it? We bought it on a site, and you said, good luck if they even germinate.
Yeah, I think you bought those.
Sesame seeds, I think I bought.
Yeah, I said good luck if they're even rose seeds.
Yeah.
But frequently you'll see pictures of roses that have been electronically modified,
yes.
And they're just not going to come true from seed. But Greg, maybe you could let Hastam know briefly about growing roses from seed and whether or not they need to be stratified or scarified before they're planted. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll give you the Albert Einstein answer. How's that?
Yeah, beautiful. Go ahead.
I have never been able to grow a rose from a seed, so I'm the last person you should ask.
Really?
And I've tried.
Well, I have grown some roses from seed, Hastam, and one of the things they'll say is the roses are going to do better if they're cold treated. So if you can refrigerate the seed, and again, it depends what type of rose it is, where it's from, but refrigerating's never going to hurt. So if you can refrigerate the seeds for probably about 2 months before you plant them.
Sounds like you're talking about bulbs, John.
Well, it depends. If you have those types of cold climate bulbs and you're in a warm climate, you have to refrigerate them. But you don't put them in the freezer, Hastam, just put them in the refrigerator. And after a couple months, if you go ahead and plant them, and they can take up to 2 to 3 years to germinate. Some will germinate the first spring, but others you may have to wait a year. And I have rose seeds right now that are coming up it's been the second year, going into the second year. So
I think patience is the operative word, right, John?
Right. And Hastam, remember that whatever comes up is going to be brand new and unique to you. So you'll have the genetics that the rose came from, but you're not going to know exactly what it is that you're going to get. So anyway, hope that helps a little bit. We were talking prior to the break about some mislabeling and tags and things like that. And we went from Dortmund to the town of Kassel. And in Kassel, they did something unique to help with mislabeling. And their problem with mislabeling was people stealing tags.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, because if you've got a rose, you want to know what it is.
Right.
Just here's an engraved tag.
It's a ready-made tag.
Right.
Very professional.
So when you go through their garden, all their roses have numbers, and they mentioned that even with numbers,
people are stealing.
People would steal the numbers.
Oh my gosh!
But we had a booklet that would tell us what that rose was by the number and by the location. So we were able to identify roses there. But again, a completely different rose garden than Dortmund and any rose garden I had ever been to. And I was wondering if you could share with our audience, Greg, a little bit about the trip to Kassel.
Wow, that was something else. Well,
I'm still disappointed that you and Steve, when we were maybe 10 minutes from the top, decided that you wanted to go back to the bottom.
I know, me too. I will regret that for a long time. Castle Wilhelmshöhe, is a grand scale European garden built in the 18th century. Actually, started much earlier than that. On the most magnificent scale you can imagine. It's like the size of Manhattan, and it's Manhattan with a mountain in the middle of it. And on the top of that mountain is a statue of Hercules that's the size of the Statue of Liberty. And from that statue flows this incredible cascade of water down the mountainside and finally landing in this pool at the bottom and going through a beautiful little river valley with islands where the roses are planted. So it's like, wow. It's amazing.
And the rose, some of the, one rose I'm still trying to remember, and I can't remember if I got the name right, but you pointed it out and you said it was a rose you used to have, and it was a large plant, and for some reason I can't think of the name, but it's almost, is Monster correct? It was anyway. We were certainly talking about Monster in reference to that rose when we saw it. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I think I do, but the name is not bubbling up from my memory at the moment.
I think that maybe Jill Perry at the San Jose Heritage Rose Garden had mentioned a plant called Monster that reminded me of this one that you put out. But anyway, whether it was Monster or not by name, it certainly was by size. And there were tons of old garden roses and species mixed with newer roses. And is Castle the place where we saw the, I think they were, I'm trying to think if you or Steve told me they were hybrid Gallicas. I thought
I think Steve had noticed that there are people who are breeding modern-day Gallica roses, a lot of which don't rebloom. And that was one of the places where we were able to see some of those new creations that look like old European roses, but are actually modern.
Yeah, I think it was a rose breeder out of Italy that we were able to.
That's right. Yes.
To find that out on. Okay, when we come back, we're going to move from Castle to Lauterbach. And continue talking with Gregg Lowery about roses.
That's right. 2 more segments still to come, those on Biz Talk Radio, those right here on Facebook Live. And again, thank you for the questions and comments during our interview with Gregg Lowery here on Facebook Live. We're going to take a break for Biz Talk Radio. Back after these messages. This is Garden America. All right, we are back from the break. We trust you had a good break. Facebook Live, Biz Talk Radio. 2 more segments to go as we continue on this weekend. And by the way, you missed any part of this show or want to hear or watch it back again this afternoon, first of all, go to gardenamerica.com. And from there, it'll take you to a link to our YouTube channel, Garden America Radio Show. And you can watch this afternoon's show again. It'll be posted sometime this afternoon. And again, also on our YouTube channel, every other show we've done for the past 2 or 3 years, John. But again, go to gardenamerica.com. John?
Yeah, we're talking to Gregg Lowery about world-famous rosarian, about our trip to Europe this summer looking for roses. Before we do that, Rick in Idaho wants to know who the best rose growers in the United States are right now by region. And if you mean rose producers, Rick, right now most roses are produced in Arizona.
Really?
and some still in Wasco, California, that are shipped, and I think maybe a few in Tyler, Texas, that are shipped all over the
And every
U.S.
place you mentioned, we're talking heat.
Yeah,
They're very hot places.
they're all very
yeah.
hot places, right? There are some roses grown in Canada in cooler places which use multiflora rootstock. One is palatine roses, and then one is hortico roses up in British Columbia. But anyway, that's the main producers. And Greg, can you think of any mail order sources that you would recommend for harder to find, maybe old garden roses, or harder to find modern roses?
Well, one of my favorite sources is a business called High Country Roses, which started in western Colorado and is now located in Utah, I believe. It's a mail-order nursery, and they ship plants in small pots. And they have put together a beautiful collection of older varieties of roses, some of which are once blooming, but mostly are remontant, reblooming roses that really tell a good story about the history of roses, and their focus is on very fragrant roses too, which I really admire.
Yeah.
They're a really good company.
I've bought roses from them before, and I would agree. I would recommend High Country Roses also. They have a nice website for you to look at, Rick. I don't know where the time's gone, but we only have a couple segments, and I know we could do a whole show on Zangerhausen, but before we get to Zangerhausen, you communicated before we went to Germany with a gentleman named Rudolf Bergman, and Rudolf and his wife Veronica hosted us in Lauterbach, where their home is. And I thought maybe you could briefly tell us about Rudolf's work and the garden we were able to visit that he's in charge of. Well, actually, it's his own garden.
Yeah. Rudolf Bergman is a retired engineer who developed a passion for roses in his adult life, and living in Central Europe, was attracted to the old roses that grew and survived in old gardens there, and began putting together a garden of roses, and actually leased a piece of land or purchased a small piece of land in a village nearby, where he could just plant his rose collection. He and his wife Veronica have a lovely garden at their home, which is her inspiration, which includes lots of roses. But Rudolph came to my attention through Facebook. He friended me, and I began to follow his Rose Biblio page online, which is a multilingual encyclopedia of roses. And it is absolutely packed, as you can imagine an engineer would do, with scientific, historical data, making it accessible to people who speak different languages. So we can read it in English. People in France can read it in French. It's there in German, and other languages are coming along, like Italian. So if you want to find out, really do a deep dive into roses and their history and all the information you can find, beyond Help Me Find Roses, which is a superb and perhaps the greatest source. His source, Rudolph's Rose Biblio, provides you that extra deep dive.
So the way to find that online would be to just Google Rose Biblio?
That's it, Rose Biblio.
All right.
I hate Kevin's question.
Did I see Kevin's question? Any recommendations for rose plant pairings that will make the roses grow more healthy in a symbiotic relationship. I think he's talking about companion
Yeah.
plants, Greg. I know we saw a lot of that in Germany. Did you have any quick ideas on companion plantings for roses?
Oh, I have thousands, but I want to add one which is kind of out of the ordinary, and that is weeds. Weeds are really, really important in gardening, and that's actually where we get the real symbiotic relationships between garden plants and the rest of the natural world. The things that grow well wild around your roses are doing well because they do actually form a symbiotic relationship in the soil with the soil organisms and the mycorrhizae that are connected with the roses.
Well,
let your weeds grow in a few patches in your garden, please.
Right. So what you're saying is weeds get along with everybody and everything.
You know,
they do.
You've just lightened my workload.
Yeah.
Tremendously. But weeds also provide seeds for bird life.
Yeah.
Pollinators.
And John, there's virtually no maintenance.
They're maintenance free, and they provide spots for beneficial insects to thrive. So, yeah, in one sense, I agree with you.
If you want to cultivate ladybugs, you definitely want to leave some grasses, the wild grasses growing.
Yeah. The only thing is you don't want them around the rose bush, because I spent this week finding roses I thought I lost that were just overgrown with weeds.
We got a couple of minutes, John, till the next break.
Okay, and we don't have much time, so we're going to start with Zangerhausen, which is the world's largest collection of roses. And Greg, let's start with your initial impression, because my whole rose life, I've been looking forward to getting to Zangerhausen, and you build up something in your mind, and often you're disappointed. And this was far above my expectations.
Wow, yeah, and it's hard to know exactly where to start. Two things. One, I had been told by many friends who'd visited Zangerhausen over the years that Zangerhausen is not a garden, it's just a collection of roses. So don't go there with expectations of visiting a beautiful garden. And that was so far from the truth. It's a massive garden, and they have gone to huge lengths to grow all kinds of plants, trees, shrubs, flowering shrubs, perennials, annuals, and mix them with roses in so many parts of that garden. The second thing that struck me in talking with people once we got there was the realization that this garden, this massive garden of roses, created more than 100 years ago, has always belonged to the city of Zangerhausen. It's a city that's not much larger than Santa Rosa in California. For over 100 years, the population of that city has protected that garden through all kinds of political regimes. That garden has survived.
Hey, Greg, got to take a quick break. We've got one more segment coming up, so hold that train of thought. Apologies for interrupting, but we have to take a break for our friends on Biz Talk Radio, John, and our sponsors who keep us on the air. So we're going to come right back with Gregg Lowery, wrapping up our show for this week. Again, one more segment. Brian Main, John Begnasco, right here on Garden America. Stay with us. All right, we have returned from the break. Those on Biz Talk Radio, those on Facebook Live, thank you for your interactions this morning, all the good questions and comments. This is our final segment, John, so we're going to wrap things up here with a little bit more time this morning, and so happy to have Gregg Lowery with us, John.
Yeah, and Gregg, when we left Gregg, he was just getting into his descriptions of Sangerhausen and the people of Sangerhausen and the importance of the rose garden, so I'll let you continue, Gregg.
Well, I don't know what to say. I don't know. It's overwhelming. To someone who loves roses, it's a great place to spend days. But to someone who has spent a big part of their lives growing many varieties, learning about the relationships of all of these plants, how they fit into human history, to have it all there in one place, and so lovingly tended, it's a great experience, a wonderful experience.
And I know that there's dozens, if not hundreds, of roses where Sangerhausen may have one of the last remaining species, and I was heartened to realize how willing they were to share what they had in order to keep that species going. And through some of your work with the Friends of Vintage Roses, we've been able to return varieties back to Sangerhausen that they had lost. And in return, they've been instrumental in trying to get other varieties out of Sangerhausen and into other gardens, and hopefully someday some of those will make it here. I was probably most surprised at Sangerhausen to see the polyantha roses. I remember Steve calling me and saying, "We found a treasure trove of polyanthas."
Yeah,
and polyanthas had a short-lived popularity, and there were so many varieties at Sangerhausen that I had never even heard of. I would say close to 100 varieties that may not even be on Help Me Find.
Yes.
I know that you and Steve spent a lot of time in some of the older garden roses. Was there anything there that specifically you were surprised to see?
There were hundreds of things, but I'll tell you the thing that most affected me about the old European roses at Sangerhausen. They had made a decision to, instead of having all of the old roses in their collection in one section of the garden, they had duplicated them so that there were more than one plant in more than one place in Sangerhausen. So if you did this short loop, you were likely to bang into some of those old roses somewhere along the way. And I love that. But the thing that struck me, John, so deeply was, as I would walk through this massive garden, I would get to a corner, and before I turned the corner, I could smell the old roses. And I'd been amongst roses for the past 4 hours, but once again, I hit another patch of old roses. And my lesson from that to the world is, you damn well better hold on to the old roses, because if you love the fragrance, the real fragrances in roses, they have the greatest.
Perfect words to end with, and I wish that we could hold on to this show a little bit longer, but we're constrained by time, Brian.
Absolutely, but what a great show and a lot of interest, no doubt.
Right, and thank you again so much for joining us and sharing your memories with us, Gregg. And if people want to find out more about Gregg and his work, Google the Friends of Vintage Roses, and you'll find out, see what they're doing.
Right.
Thanks again, Gregg.
Thank you, Gregg.
Thank you. Thank you both.
All right, very good. And obviously, looking at some of the numbers here on Facebook, a lot of interest shown on today's show. And again, this was one we reached out to people. What do you want us to talk about? What are the subjects that most interest you? And this was one, obviously, roses with Gregg Lowery.
Yeah, Carla says, great show. Please have Gregg back. She says, great show back, referring to us, I guess. After, what were we gone, 3 months?
No, it seems like it. Two weeks.
Just 2
because
weeks.
you were gone, then you came back, and then you were gone again for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Of a heat wave.
Yes, we are.
We usually get Santa Ana winds in October, and I'm surprised at the effect on some of my plants. I have some new sun patience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
That the heat.
There's an indicator plant right there.
Well, the heat coupled with the moisture in the ground, trying to keep plants wet, has taken a couple of beautiful specimens I had, and they just melted. They look terrible. I mean, the ground is wet, so I can't give them more water.
Right, that's not the answer.
And they're dying before my eyes.
And you know what? You live in an area that's not protected at all, really.
No, we have winds. If it's windy, it's going to be by me, right?
You're out in the open there.
Yeah.
So, hey, but that was good. And again, so good to have Gregg on and the interest in roses and the preservation of roses. And, you know, John, I think the one thing that you and Gregg probably shared in common was the fact that when you went to Europe now, you're with all these like-minded people that speak your language.
Yeah, it was really heartening to realize there were people like that in the world. And right. Gregg did correct me on Facebook again. I get something in my head and I don't change. I keep saying the Friends of Vintage Gardens. It's
Vintage Rose Gardens.
Right? No, the Friends of Vintage Roses.
Oh, roses. Okay.
Right. So Google the Friends of Vintage Roses.
Hey, that's going to do it. We've got a skedaddle scram because of time restraints.
Tiger will be back with us, right?
Tiger's back with us next week, and I don't have to worry about the video or the cameras. And the computer
you did
and
a
the
good
network
job,
show.
Brian.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Hey, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Please tell your friends, tell your family about our show. Go to gardenamerica.com. Let's talk about Costa Rica. Let's get some people on the trip, and let's get more people to watch and listen to our show here on Garden America. For the entire crew, I'm Brian Main, Tiger Palafox, John Bagnasco. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you again next week right here on Garden America. Take care.